Hello everyone! In this video, I'm going to explain some basic concepts for making decent dioramas for relatively little money. I love dioramas. They're big, colorful, fun environments that are fun to make and can escalate a shelf from toys to art exhibit. Or it can just be a big dollhouse or playset. Pick whatever word you want. But the point of this video is that buying pre-made dioramas can be expensive, and you can probably do a lot more than you think for under $100. I want to be clear here that this is not a hit against anyone selling any form of Star Wars dioramas. There are many designer pieces, both handmade and 3D printed, that are better quality than what I will show you in this video. There are some Star Wars environments that you could argue can only be accurately created when printed directly from a model. This video is for those who are on a budget and will be just fine with a B-tier display. This is the diorama that I made of the Mos Eisley streets. When I was younger, I had this idea in my head that You're just gonna hear a cat throughout this. She gets real excited when I record. So when I was younger, I had this idea in my head that I'd one day perfectly replicate the Battlefront 2 2005 Mos Eisley map as a diorama. As an adult, I realized that unless I become an eccentric billionaire, that would be a nightmare at any scale except maybe micro machines. So I settled for something in a shelf format that I could expand or shorten as I see fit. These are the ingredients to making this shelf or something like it. Keep in mind, I bought in bulk and still have a lot of stuff left over, so if I were to go just by what I used of this cost is probably closer to $60. This diorama is on the planet Tatooine. Why that planet, you may ask? Because Tatooine buildings are generally dirty and simple. That's why. It's an iconic location, but it's also the simplest. You can do some fancier stuff, but at its core, this is all you need. Basic shapes plus grime equals Tatooine building. I don't think I've ever seen anyone without a 3D printer dare attempt stuff like Coruscant or the Jedi Temple. Also, as I write this, I have just observed that Microsoft Word accepts Coruscant as a proper word. Great job, everyone! So I made this 4-foot-long sand terrain base, and then made some modular backdrops and partial houses that I can arrange however I like on it. This took me about 15 hours to make, but a lot of that time was spent trying to see what was possible with my materials and mapping out each section. If you take away the thinking time, it's probably a couple hours less. Also, I had a big scale in mind for this. Not Hot Toys, I'm not crazy or rich enough, but 1 to 12 is still pretty big. Most of these items come in smaller quantities, so you could save some extra money if you have a smaller scene in mind, or just a smaller scale such as the Vintage Collection or Legion or Shatterpoint. Do it. Before I get to the instructional part, here is a quick tour of my new little slice of Mos Eisley. So this building is run by, or at least currently guarded by, the Imperials. Daedra is pointing, is it Daedra or Daedra? I forget from the show. I'm just gonna go how I see it. So Daedra is pointing out that the Mandalorian is right there with the child, but she will probably be ignored. Okay, quick note on this figure. I tried Andor and I didn't finish it. It wasn't awful, but I found myself bored or not caring a lot at the time, and it was just a busier time in my life. I probably didn't see enough to hold a proper discussion, but that was my initial feelings from a few episodes. But because of that, I find it hilarious that Daedra's figure comes with a data pad. Like, her show was so boring that her accessory lets you pretend she's staring at reports or spreadsheets. And the face sculpt only makes it funnier if you put her by someone, because it looks like she is very insistent that they also read her spreadsheets, but they just want none of it. Maybe I'll make a video that's just about stuff I find funny about some of these figures, like that one Dengar figure with the weirdest choice in removable armor. The old peg-jointed sand trooper is also there. The weathering on the new Remnant stormtroopers made them fit in well too. I'm not sure if I like having the patrol trooper there. I like the figure, but he's a little too squeaky clean, both for Mos Eisley and also he does have a bit of that shine that we'd see like on some of the early clone troopers that just kind of screams, "Hey, I'm plastic!" So here's the second segment of the shelf. It's a simple wall, but it has a few alcoves for people to hide in. This is where you'll start to notice that I'm mixing up continuity a little. Yes, Andor and Jyn should be dead. Well, I didn't want to army build rebel troopers, and Andor's friends have some unique clothes. So I decided they're alive, but maybe like they're their own rebel clique. They're their little clique within the rebels. Dash and Kyle are in the expanded universe clique. Maybe Kyle's walking back from investigating the stormtrooper building, and Dash is, well, he's just standing around, but he's definitely cool, and cooler than Han Solo. Andor's team is ready to pull off some heist. Vel's looking at her watch. Cal's watching from the balcony. He isn't sure how involved he'll be in this yet. And also someone just needed to be on the balcony. Bane is watching from under the balcony, probably seeing how much money everyone is worth. On the other side is another of my simple walls and our main characters. Chewie is making sounds, because that's all he does. Han is doing some charismatic shrug complaining thing. Mara is telling Luke that she definitely isn't a good person and will kill him one day because she was the Emperor's hand, and she will totally not marry him instead. Leia is tired of everyone, and also wondering what the suspicious droid is doing. And then the final segment is a half building where we have Dr. Aphra and her companions trying to talk their way into a Pike-owned building. Having this building jut forward does take away some space, but like the bridge in the middle, I thought it broke it up from being just a series of mostly flat backdrops. It also gives me a solid corner for some photos. Dash, Imperial tax season is here, and you don't need TurboTax when you have Empire offices latest. I like having a building on each end of this, and I do plan to add some more eventually, but keep them spaced out a bit so we go a bit more like building, then just some space for maybe some shootouts to happen, or maybe even a market scene. But I want it to be so that there's some different spots that are clearly ruled by different factions. As you just saw, I did build the main display already, but I did not record that, as a lot of it was figuring out just what I could and could not create with my materials. Now that it turned out in a serviceable way, I filmed just a little bit so that you can understand the basic process and then be free to design your own shelf diorama. If you want a sand base like I made, then you spray some scenic cement on the styrofoam sheet and spread some fine ballast on it. I recommend using the back of a plastic spoon to spread it so that you don't make a mess of glue on your hands. Once spread, just spray the top a second time so it really sticks. As an alternative, you could go to a hobby store and purchase one of those very thin sand bases, the ones on a rolled up sheet. That would save you a fair amount of money, as you wouldn't need to pay for the foam sheet, the scenic cement, or the ballast. For me personally, I like the more noticeable texture of using the fine ballast and large uninterrupted segment that the foam sheet provides. If you're using something like, if you're doing this for the vintage collection though, that smaller scale, that cheaper option might actually work better for you. Although the shelf display can be expanded on either side, I want to make an end cap for it, to continue the illusion that this is a full city. I'm making this an archway that will have a photo of Mos Eisley in it so that it looks like the shelf never ends. This won't be a permanently secured image because I think it would be fun to use this piece as a simple transition segment between sections, but I could also put a photo of a more barren part of Tatooine so it looks like it leads out of town. This is one piece of the XPS foam from Amazon. It is 1 square foot and a ½ inch thick. For those of you who like to go out to stores instead of ordering online, there is an alternative, but it won't be as easy to work with. Lowe's and Home Depot both sell XPS foam, but from what I can tell, your only unfaced option comes as 2 square feet by 1 inch thick, which makes it more difficult to cut and requires a sort of heated foam cutter instead of just a plain box or utility cutter. So I recommend just buying off Amazon. You can pick from a few base colors, sizes, and quantities. There's some mild difference if you go by color, but I think it's only like $2. This project was my first time using the 1/2 inch off Amazon instead of the store-bought 1-inch thick, and this choice saved me a lot of time and effort, which made the overall project more enjoyable. As I said, I want to make an archway. I don't want this to be as big as the grand archway I've already made. This is just meant to be something simple that can cap off the display or help separate town sections. I'm using a few figures for scale. We're using Comic Leia to check for the smaller heights. We'll use my new favorite version of the Stormtrooper, the new Remnant one from the Mando movie. The one that has that nice weathering on it, gives you a couple options for what it can wear. And Chewie for the big ones. For stability purposes, I can't make everything fit Chewbacca perfectly, it just ends up with me cutting away a lot. But I've always assumed that he has to duck for doors anyway, so I'll go the same amount in from each side and mark it, and then mark what I want to be the highest point. From there, I'll just eyeball the curved parts to finish outlining the opening, or at least that's what I was supposed to do. As you can see watching here, I messed it up. And I went ahead and I cut out a big old rectangle. So what I decided to do was just make it taller than I'd like it to be, but I guess Chewie finally has one door that works. It's easy to cut fairly straight with the box cutter, and many of you probably have methods and tools to ensure that it's even straighter. Feel free to post those in the comments. The curved parts are a little trickier, but I just go little by little. If there's anything too jagged, I'll just cut that off after I take the piece out. Okay, this is the most important part of this video. A lot of this is probably just a big duh for many of you, but this is the part that might not be common knowledge. So to make these buildings look realistic, we need to get some texture on the surface before we paint it. I've seen different methods of this on YouTube and tried several myself. You can buy spray paint that has a rock texture to it, but with spray paint you always risk it melting or wearing on the foam a little. It's not nearly as bad with XPS foam, but it can happen to some extent. I've also seen plaster used and then coated with a variety of paints, and I think I even saw a sort of sawdust mixed used in one video. All of these work, and depending on the individual in the project, may work even better than my method. But the method that I'm showing you is one that I have found to be fast and easy, but still high enough quality for my own standards. This is acrylic gesso. Gesso, it's basically an acrylic primer. It's thick, dries fairly fast, and doesn't make a mess. I apply this gesso as a sort of sealant and texture over the foam. I intentionally mix up the brush strokes so that I have some different directions going on, and I like to leave it heavier in some spots too. Once dry, I put this acrylic paint over it. This is just one that I bought at Walmart. I thought I'd need 2 for this project, but I've made all this and this is still the first one, so it goes a long way. I do the same thing as I did with the gesso and the brush strokes. So now we're having a second layer, a different texture, some more different directions that just adds more texture again, that's the word here. Then I have to wait for it to dry. And for most of this, I was actually patient enough to let it dry. So after this dries, I apply a wash. I'm not great at washes, but I've greatly improved since my Yavin 4 video. So I'm mixing in some acrylic from Walmart. Yes, I know that doesn't look great. But then I'm also mixing in a small amount of this kind of gray-brown from a tabletop gaming paint. I'm going to mix that together. Now I apply some of the wash, and all those small details from our gesso should start to show more. Then I use a paper towel to remove some of it. Not all, but this is acrylic, so I can't let water sit on it for too long or I'm just going to lose my paint. After that, it just has to dry. Then I'll put that printed picture on the back and we'll add it to the display. And that's all there is to it. This is a great way to make a modular and unique diorama on a budget. Also, it's all non-toxic materials, so you don't need to worry about ventilation. The dog or the cat, even the family, can hang around while you work. Overall, I'm happy with how this turned out. I do plan to replace the cheap and now miscolored door on the one building, but that'll be something I do later. There are options online, both eBay and Etsy, and also just STL files if you have a printer, and you can just print doors for these. I'm keeping this cheap though, and also at this point I feel like something of total 3D print quality might stick out a little bit. There are also many options for 3D printed greeblies if you do want to put a little more money into this. You could probably figure out some type of hybrid of the foam and print methods. You have so many options, and I hope this video helped give you some ideas for your shelves. Thanks for watching. Bye!